time grief we go. Gotta learn to let it go. Once asleep, now awake, feeling every breath you take.
Welcome to Wake the F Up podcast, hosted by Alix and David Long, where we talk about living consciously and helping people uncover their essential selves so that they can stop sleepwalking through life. Our goal is to create a safe space where our guests can share how they've decided to wake the F up and become mindfulness experts through their own emotional healing journey. Welcome to Wake the F Up podcast. I am Alix, your host, and my co-host and husband, Dr. David Long.
Baldy,
Kicking rocks over here, as one of our cute YouTubers had said. It made me giggle. Thank you, everybody, for all of your amazing feedback in our YouTube channel. We're getting a ton of feedback, and it's actually so wonderful to just see the engagement and see that we're reaching people and people are thinking about some of the topics that we're talking about. So keep them coming, even if they're derogatory or calling us baldy. We love it because, in fact, he is bald. And, in fact, probably does need to kick some rocks.
Yeah, I've kicked rocks in my day.
Yeah, sometimes whatever your outlet might be. Well, welcome today. We are excited and kind of coming in with more of a tool-oriented session today. So we're going to talk actually about the 5 steps of healing from loss. This is coming from Wake Wellness, our company, and we are excited to share. It's been a long time coming to put these steps on paper. We believe these to be universal. Much like the grief cycle, I would say that these 5 steps to getting through loss or getting yourself to a more resilient space post-loss are sequential, generally, but not necessarily linear. So you might bounce back and forth. If you don't completely go through a step, you may have to go back. And if you don't get yourself in certain places, you might find yourself repeating, and, many times over. So I'm actually going to ask David today to be sort of our supermodel. Everyone has been so excited about his frame of reference, and I have to agree, like, probably one of my coping strategies and one of my survival skills has always been to anticipate and read a room. And this journey, editing and going through and listening to everyone's feedback and therapy and all the modalities we do, I struggle sometimes to shut up. Jokingly and not so jokingly, my original business partner, Jamie, who stepped out for her job reasons and life reasons, laughingly helped me come up with my Instagram handle, which is Alix Long-Winded. There's a reason I talk too much. I think it's a survival pattern. I think I'm always wanting to, like, be ready or something. I don't know. So lately I've been realizing when editing, I'm listening. I'm listening, listeners. I agree with you. David has literally the most valuable things to say, and when I shut up,
it's not true. I just have the idiot's perspective.
That's so true.
Which I think a lot of people in this arena share, that a lot of people don't really know much about framing or putting into perspective feelings and relationships. And you've been doing it a long time, and I haven't, so I think people are probably interested to hear from somebody who's really kind of a moron when it comes to this arena. And as I'm exploring, I suspect they're exploring as well. Because sometimes on the show, actually a lot of times on the show, I say things for the first time I've ever thought of them, which is great. So it's not like I have really, years and years of experience with this, but sometimes things come to me for the first time, which is probably I think that a lot of the listeners probably also are hearing things for the first time. So that's probably some resonance there, I would guess. I don't know.
Well, it's super powerful to be your wife and co-host. I'm also, while learning to listen in a better way, super powerful when you actually do pay attention and slow down a little bit. I think getting things out there is important to me. I'm so passionate about helping people who are in the station of a shattering post-loss and grief, and clearly we're widows who have rebuilt our lives post-loss of our spouses with children. But I think we speak to grief in general, and grief can be anything. And so I'm extremely passionate about this because I think actually if I had walked these 5 steps that we'll talk through today, my life would be really different. I think I would have had a lot less loss. I'm not sure that I would be awake, as we like to say, and I don't know that I would, without this massive loss, have valued life and love the way that I do today. And I don't know that I would be listening. I think I would be still working out of survival skills to be smart enough. That was something in my house. I felt like I always had to be knowledgeable. My father's really, really bright and would always tell us in a narcissistic kind of way. I don't know if it was intentional, but we weren't bright enough. We weren't knowledgeable. He would say, well, "You're showing your ignorance." I think that was like a phrase that I would hear every single day. And so when you hear "you're ignorant," even if he's saying "your ignorance," which is not saying you're ignorant, it felt as though I was always ignorant. And the way with 6 kids I had to be heard was I kind of had to get loud, and I had to get in there and be energetic about it, right? And make my point really clear. And so when I'm passionate, I'm often really not hearing. And this whole second phase of my life, I'm learning mindfulness and waking up is really best done by awareness and observation. So I'm hopeful that these steps for you in your life, if you're not in a loss, may start you on your journey into the self of healing. And if you are in an acute loss and just went through some really crazy changes in your life where you feel like you're at a shattering point and need some rebuilding, I think these steps will hopefully really help identify some normalcy in what you're feeling. And I think David's going to be an amazing example, and I can't wait to hear what you have to say today. Okay, so basically what the entire mission of what we're doing here and what I've come to is, and it's taken time, right? Like, I think we've been feeling our way through our process and what it is that has gotten us into this space of resiliency, which take what you want with the resiliency piece. It doesn't mean, just like healing, that everything's always pretty. It means no matter how difficult the circumstances have been, we are able to get back up and keep walking forward. And it doesn't mean it doesn't hurt or we don't have a lot of work to do or things aren't really hard in our family, because it really can be super challenging. And so I want to make that very clear, that this isn't some kind of social media post where we're like, we've got it all figured out. And we do have it figured out on how to return to life. And so we're going to start to talk about step 1. Okay, so I want everyone in the listening world to understand we're going to have David walk through his experiences in each of these steps. And I want to actually test the waters and see if you felt this was universally true for you, if this resonates with you.
Yeah.
And then listeners, as you listen along, shout out and like and subscribe. But more importantly, leave some comments for us in the YouTube channel, Spotify or Apple, and let us know, like, yeah, I really felt that way. You're not alone, So this is almost like a really cool place to build community for those of us who have suffered loss. So step 1 I like to call is the acute onset of the shattering. So for you, that would have been?
The immediate aftermath,
And maybe just because we often assume the listeners know your whole story, if they stumble in, why don't you give them a little background on how Betsy died?
So she had a ruptured brain aneurysm, and she passed away in about 30 minutes, maybe. We kept her alive a little bit longer than that, just for the kids to kind of say goodbye, but she was fully supported and not there.
Was that incredibly challenging as a dual physician family Both of you doctors. And you, in fact, are an interventional radiologist.
Honestly, it was just so. I mean, it probably is likened to like being shot. It just was so rapid and unexpected that it was just a huge amount of shock. The shattering really didn't happen until really I got home. Like after we, I donated our organs and we all said goodbye, and then we came home, and that happened in 24 hours, 36 hours maybe. And when I came home, that's really when it was just, it's hard for me to talk about. It was so traumatic.
Sure.
I just didn't know anything. It was shattering is a perfect way, because there's still some fragments of your life, like obviously there's, your kids, which remind you of the person you lost, and then there's all the stuff, all the accoutrement.
Mm-hmm. The life you built is still sitting right there where you left it the morning of the loss.
So it's like walking through this, burnt down palace or something like that. You can see all the things, but you're no longer attached to them and no longer a part of it. So yeah, and that lasted a while. That was not an overnight thing. At least for me, I really did not know even where to start to pick up the pieces, or to even how to continue.
I can relate to that.
So the first stage is definitely accurate, where something happens that makes it impossible for you to continue your life the way that it was, either loss or divorce or maybe just waking up and saying you hate your job. I mean, whatever. I think it's individualized, but that's probably universal to change. Because I think as a species we don't like change too much. We prefer routine, we prefer consistency. There are some outliers probably that don't mind continual change, but I think that's rare. I think even people that find themselves in change are trying to normalize the change and make it more routine.
Right. So the grief cycle, which all of us know well, the Kubler-Ross family is well known for being the experts in grief. So if you haven't checked out their books, the whole family actually is writing in the legacy of. And so it's really important to know that they would say that the first step in grief is denial, right? It's like shock and denial.
Yeah, shock. I would describe it as shock. I knew what was going on. Definitely didn't know that it was going to change my life as much as it would. So that's probably a little denial there.
Right. So if you're out there and you just had a death or a major life-altering grief happen and you've hit a shatter, just so the listeners who may not have experienced grief to this capacity, as you can hear, David was in shock. And you can hear, we have very different death stories. He was a very quick and abrupt, extremely traumatic. And my family went through a 5-year cancer journey where there were little losses along the way. But, oddly enough, I'm not sure if anyone out there can resonate with this, in the cancer world or chronic disease, my kids and I, because Carl kept rising back up, and every time he would have an almost death experience or near death push in the hospital, he would rise back up and then be back to normal, kind of, or appear to be normal. And so when he randomly, there was just a random night he stopped talking, and he had been on hospice for so long that it almost became our normal. We were all also deeply in shock, and it felt almost like a quick, surprising, and for my children, especially my son, if you have children, I think all loss of a parent for them is, or someone super close, is that acute shock. Because they live in fantasy a little bit more than we do.
I think the moment is always going to be quick. It's just the degree of trauma before.
Right.
I didn't have any. Was literally living our normal life, dead asleep, but our normal life, right up to that moment that she called me.
Okay, so we're in the state of shock, and it's set in the reality of the scenario. So, okay, so if you are a listener out there and you're walking the steps of grief, we want to normalize the shock. And
so you said denial. I didn't want to underplay the denial. There was a lot of denial, and
well, it's like it doesn't feel real.
So there was immediate denial. In fact, I screamed at her that, don't leave me. How can you leave me like this? And then there was the denial. I actually thought a lot of this because, as a physician, you see a lot of loss. A lot of loved ones, families of loved ones of your patients and your patients' families, all that kind of stuff. And I remember distinctly thinking, this does not happen to me. Like I thought, this happens to other people. This is what happens to patients. This is what happens to people in the hospital. This does not happen to my family. So total denial of reality that it could happen. It was happening. It did happen.
I still can relate to that in some capacity. It's definitely less frequent. Not so much probably in the last few years as we've really consciously rebuilt our life, but there are moments for years after Carl died where I felt like, it's a weird, you have to be like, did this all really happen to me?
Yeah.
I think the brain is in such trauma, and it's like a person that's so integral in everything you do. Removing that massive piece to your life is really, it takes years. And what's interesting is being married to David with acute loss, the way his was just so quick and just like that, pulling the rug out from under him. Our first few years together in marriage, he would have dreams that he was breaking up with Betsy, getting divorced.
Yeah.
And I think it was his subconscious was really trying to dismantle the relationship and justify our love because...
I had a recurring dream. It was, not every night, but often. At least a couple of times a week, where I would see her, usually the back of her head, and I would be yelling at her to tell her, I needed to tell her something, and she would never respond. In fact, in some dreams, I'd right behind her, screaming, Betsy, Betsy, and she just never would, and I'd wake up.
Yeah.
And my therapist said that's very common, and basically it's your brain and your heart too, I guess, maybe.
For sure.
That don't really understand the suddenness and the shock of it. And in your mind, you're still married, you're still raising kids, you're still, living in the same house. In fact, I thought for a long time that she would come home. I had that conscious thought that she was just on vacation for a while. And after 2-3 weeks, I actually would wake up and be like, why is she still gone? She should be home by now. No matter where she was traveling to or anything. In my mind, she was traveling. My subconscious thought she was on a vacation or something. So there was a lot of both subconscious and conscious denial that this was happening to me.
And so step one, if you're out there and this is your experience, or mine might reflect a little longer. I've never had a dream about Carl, not once in this entire process. It's still a point of tenderness for me. That'll make me cry, actually. I think that, Sarah, this stuff is actually still so hard to talk about. And even hear your losses. It's funny when you're another person who's experienced the loss, you can feel, if the listeners out there question our reality of being in love and having still be able to be in love with our people who are not alive, the pain still sits right there inside of you. And then I'm in love with this person sitting next to me, and I understand his loss at a deep level, but I also feel my own pain and feel yours. And it's weird.
I think that's the process, is not to let I used to say this all the time, I gotta let it go. And that's the process, is to carry the grief and to live.
You assimilate it.
That's the process.
So step one to healing yourself from a massive loss is to feel the abandonment. This is something that I feel personally connected to. Abandonment probably is an issue of mine that's run throughout my entire life. And it might be because of my personal journey with my father abandoning me, and my mother having depression, so like being able to be in and out sort of emotionally when she was not having a good moment in depression, I have had a lot of abandonment in my life. And I didn't recognize until more recently in healing that the biggest part of loss, or the hardest part of loss, is this full abandonment. So everything is ripped from you. It's gone. So you're gone. The old you is gone. Right? Just to give the listeners a little perspective. Your old life is gone, although, like you can hear from David and myself even, like, I remember when Carl died, my mom was so helpful, lived with us to help me throughout the whole process, and, like, laundry is one of her love languages. She knows I hate doing laundry, and, like, the whole time he was in the end stages, which I didn't really realize he was end stage because he'd stopped talking, but I just knew it was bad, but I wasn't really, like, again, wasn't sure. We'd been in this zone many times. I thought he was in just acute pain and couldn't talk. She was doing laundry, like, on a fury to, like, as her way to love and help. And by the time he died, she had washed everything that he ever owned. And he at this time was in a diaper, on tubes, like, no clothing on his body. And I had nothing that smelled like him. So she had cleaned so well that our whole closet smelled like whatever, my laundry detergent. And after the funeral, we had a draw sheet, which is like nursing terminology for something to turn someone so they don't he had laid sedentary for multiple weeks in pain and couldn't move. And so my daughter, like, kept that as her Snuggie, like his draw sheet, which is a crazy story. And we actually went down to the beach, and the cleaning people who come, like, to like freshen up or whatever at Rosemary Beach where we were staying, thought it was one of their sheets and took the draw sheet. And I'll never forget that was the only article that smelled like him. And so, like, it's really common to feel the loss of the person, and then you go to your home and you feel the loss that they're not in the home, and then, like, you go hunting for almost these signals that they're alive. Yeah.
I don't know what I was looking for. I did go through all of her stuff, all of her closets. I went in her pockets and everything, looking. I don't even know what I was looking for.
Yeah, just connection, I feel like.
I was looking for any little, like, anything that would let me know that she loved me. Like, I was looking for maybe a note she had written about me. I didn't find anything, of course. Because we didn't get to, like, we didn't get to say goodbye. So I was really looking for, like, a subtle goodbye.
Yeah.
I found a couple of little weird things that you could turn into goodbyes. She wrote, but actually it's just was a note of her anxiety, actually, interestingly. I found a note that she wrote years before. It was to me, and it said she was going to London, I think, by herself, maybe, or some trip. And it said, "Dear David, if anything happens to me on this trip, let Kate, Jack, and Trig know that I love them." Which at the time I thought was really special. Like, it was because she didn't say goodbye to me in that note, but still, it felt really special. And over the years, I've come to realize that she was so anxious. She thought she was going to die every time she got on an airplane. But she got on the airplane. But interesting, huh? Anyway, so yeah, you look for something. I don't know what. I think probably it was connection. I was looking for connection.
When you talk about the step of feeling the abandonment, okay, so I'm going to assume, and again, as you can hear the rawness in our voices, we're still healing, and we will be for the rest of our lives from these experiences we've had. But when you talk about that moment when you were in the shatter and it really sunk in that you were alone, I just want to talk about how it felt for you. I mean, I think you've translated pretty well thus far, unless there's more you want to say about the alone itself, right? But maybe, like, what did it feel like for you to actually feel your feelings? Did you have to feel your feelings?
Yeah, it was totally overwhelming. I couldn't really move. I couldn't physically move much. I couldn't eat. it was a flood of emotions. But now, interestingly, it was a space because of the grief. I was okay, which was really kind of a weird side effect of the grief. Is that for the first time in my life, I felt pretty much open license to feel everything. I mean, all the stuff: anger, hatred, love, everything. That was the first time I'd ever really let myself, or felt like I was able to really feel it. And yeah, I did feel it was the first step in that. Now, the question to me when I read through these is that avoidable? Like, could you have could you have been shattered and not feel the abandonment? I don't know. Maybe. I mean, maybe there are people out there that can.
I don't know that we know the name of it. Yeah. Like I don't even know that I knew the name of it then. It's just that is right. What's happened. So right. I'd like to label it because I think sometimes naming it really helps us to identify why that feels so terrible.
Yeah.
And it is an abandoning, and you are fully alone. And it's this recognition, and I think it's really important that we've normalized this for everyone out there who's walking it. You actually are alone.
Yeah, the loneliness is intense.
Yeah.
It's intense, and it's even when you're, actually, interestingly, I think some friends of mourners, I think, really feel this as something to be guarded against. Because I had friends, and it was wonderful. I was very glad to have them that would come over, and we would just sit there. We wouldn't talk. We would just sit there, and I think they probably felt that I was lonely. That I needed someone just physically there.
And you do.
Yeah, and it was good. It was great. Now that's different than the person coming over that's trying to like fix you or tell you whatever.
Friends of the mourners, let me be clear. Keep showing up for your right. people and do that. Sit and hold space without a lot of trying to tell them what to do. It doesn't matter if you have people there 24/7. You will have moments in the shower when you're alone at night where this overwhelming sense of abandonment and being alone sets in. And I want to remind everyone out there, there isn't healing without fear and scary and anxiety and all of these, like that, actually feeling all of it is how you get through it.
Yeah.
So, be afraid, but know that this is so normal, and that taking the steps to admit that everything is gone. You are gone, the you that you once knew. Every part of your life is gone. You will never be the same. We say this all the time. You can't be the same anymore. Your home feels different, even if things are sitting right in the coffee mug that Betsy left that morning, still in the sink. All of that is gone. And you feel abandoned, alone. And it's okay, because I want you to think about this. So if that's where you are and you're listening, it's okay. Because being alone is how you're going to get out of this. So being with yourself and knowing that actually, and this is like, oh, F off. You might want to say that if you're actually literally sitting in grief right now in the early stages. We are always alone. It's just that we fill our life with connection and sometimes false safety, sometimes real safety, that we're not alone. And actually, when we feel alone, we're scared to death. That means we're unlovable. Okay, well, your person may have loved the shit out of you. It might have been your soulmate that just died. Well, or you got to, whatever. Like the worst loss ever with the best person. Either way, you've always been alone. And actually, the only way to heal is to accept that we have to go inside. And that's going to lead us to step 2. Okay, step 2 is when the shatter happens. You've already discussed, okay, you can't hide the flood of emotions. You've accepted that you are alone. You're in denial, but you've semi-accepted that this reality is not going back to the way it was.
Yeah.
You might still question your reality, and that's normal. But going inside, we talked about this a little bit in the last few episodes, which is the world outside of you is moving fast. Everything is slowed down. I had a really dear friend of mine who's a DMP, who was Carl's DMP, wrote the term, what was it again? Something like retardation. It was like something's
I don't know.
I forget. It's anyway. I'll circle back and put it in the show notes. But it was really interesting. There's actually a psychological term for the brain slowing you down. That's happening, and you're forced inside. Can you share some experience?
Yeah.
What that was like for you? And you kind of started to talk about it.
So I tried to really right after 2 weeks. I took 2 weeks off after she died from work. Interestingly, one of my partners, God bless him, was like, "Take 6 months." Told me to take 6 months off. I was like, in retrospect, maybe I should have. I don't know. I probably would have never gone back. I had to take 6 months. But anyway, I took 2 weeks off, and I went back. And I went back with the intention to really continue exactly the way I was. Like, I thought, I'm just going to go back to work. Work will consume 10 to 11 hours per day. That'll take care of a lot of issues, you know. And then I'll go home and I'll take care of the business of home, which is feeding the kids, getting them to and from school, making sure, you know, the business of a family gets done. And then I'll go to bed, and I'll sleep for I'll sleep for like 8 hours, so that'll take care of that period. So I really only had a couple of times when I thought that would be open for me not to shove it down, I guess really was my plan. And that was a total failure. I mean, my first day of work was absolute disaster. I got like halfway through the first procedure and just started bawling, crying. Everybody in the room was, you know, don't want to say anything because the doctor's crying. The patients are not asleep, so they're like looking up, thinking, what, you know, they don't know.
My physician's mentally unstable.
Yeah, and but I got a little bit better over the next few weeks, but not much. I could get like 2 cases done in a day. Well, we would do 20 in a day, so I was way upside down and backwards, and so I did try to maintain the glass house, if you will, the house of cards, if you will. I tried to kind of make it, and I would go over to my friends for dinner, just like, you know, before. And I mean, and I think they thought the same thing. I think they thought that we could just kind of keep going and we could hold a place for Betsy, but nothing really else would really change, you know? And that just totally flies in the face of the fact that while you're in this stage of going inside, you are a completely different person. And you don't know who that person is. Well, I didn't know. I did not know who the person was, but I knew that I was different and that I couldn't keep doing what I was doing, including work. Like, I couldn't work the same way that I had been working. I couldn't have the same interaction with my kids that I had. I couldn't really do... I could put gas in my truck the same way, you know, but I mean, other than basic stuff like that, everything else was unrecognizable and not able to be done, really.
When you went inside, what did you realize? What did you hear inside?
Well, that's when I first started. When that was failing,
So you tried your old coping strategies, is what you're saying?
I did.
And they were failing.
Yeah, totally not working.
What happened when they failed you? You would go back, you'd have to lay back down?
Yeah, I would lock back up. So I slept a lot. And when I wasn't sleeping, I just lay there. And I would just lay there a lot.
Or freeze at work and have to go into your office.
Yeah, freeze at work. And my nurses were so wonderful. I would come out like kind of half with it, and I'd say, okay, let's try and do another case. And Jeannie, my nurse, would say, we went ahead and everybody else rescheduled. Just like that. I was like, what? She goes, yeah, just, people called in and they're going to come in some other time. Okay.
What a sweetie.
Yeah, she was really nice about it. And she would let me work to my capacity. If I could do 2, 3, and then she'd just cancel the rest of the day. And it was really wonderful, and she was really sweet about it. And she did it in such a way that it kind of allowed my mind to think that I wasn't quitting and I was trying, but it wasn't, it wasn't really my fault that I couldn't get it done.
Right.
It was really nice. So at the end of that, I started to just really question, because those coping strategies are who you are, right? I mean, you rely on those so heavily for every single interaction. And when they don't work, it's super unsettling. Mm-hmm. And that's when I really started to question, who am I? You know what I mean? when we talk about men needing to provide, and I started thinking, if I can't provide, who am I? Like, this is going to require a huge redefine of who I am. And then at the same time, you're starting to kind of not enjoy. There's some anhedonia there with the grief and depression. Anhedonia means you can't feel a happiness. So there's some of that where like you're doing some of the stuff that you used to do, and it just doesn't feel joyful. Like.
Or right.
Yeah, like Betsy and I had two friends that we loved just to go over to their house and just talk, and it was very nice. We'd have a glass of wine, some minimal food, and it was just it was a simple, pleasant thing, and it was nice. And I tried to do that afterwards, and it had no joy. I felt no joy in it. So when you start doing things that you know are joyful, like, for example, sex, I had zero interest in sex. Zero. Just didn't feel any pleasure, didn't want to feel any pleasure. And that's a core thing, to want to feel good, right? And so all the things that I used to do that made me feel good just made me feel the same thing. Hunting, fishing, I tried to do all that stuff and just really felt nothing. And it was very disturbing, because all of a sudden I started thinking that I don't know how to make myself happy. You know what I mean? I don't know how to take care of my person. Ironically, I hadn't really taken care of my person before. But I had filled my person at least with a lot of stuff. And those things that I filled it with would give me little moments of pleasure in the past, and they gave me nothing. Including like wine. I think I told you a story before. I used to drink quite a bit of wine. I enjoyed it. It was fun. Pairings and the science behind it, and the umami, if you will, or whatever. I know a lot of people out there love wine probably the same as I do. And I was paranoid of alcohol after she died, because I didn't want to slip into this alcoholism thing, and I was kind of aware that was not a great coping. I don't know how I knew that was not a good coping strategy, but I did. So I didn't drink much, and but finally, it was probably 4, 5, 6 months. I was like, I had all this wine, and I'm thirsty, so I'm gonna open a bottle. I opened a bottle, and I poured it, and I took a sip, and I was like, Actually, my first thought was the wine was off. I thought, it's corked or acetoned or whatever, and I took another sip, and it wasn't off. It just didn't taste good. And I looked at the wine, and I was like, do I even like wine? Do I even, you know what I mean?
Right.
And even like movies, I would watch. I love movies, and I would turn movies on to kind of zone out, if you will. I just got nothing out of it at all. So yeah, there's well put that. It was a time when I tried quite persistently all my coping strategies, and really none of them worked.
Okay, so going inside is exactly that. It's perfect, like the perfect description. And especially because we share these things, and I talk to you about these steps, but like naturally this is what you did. You had to go inside, because every time you went back to your old self or old patterns or old things. I equate this to like what people say when you're in the grief walk. They'll talk to you about like grief is like an ocean. You're in the ocean, and like these huge waves are knocking you down. And going inside is when the beginning, the waves are drowning you. Literally, you're just trying to tread water and get out above water for a minute. Maybe 30 seconds, 10 seconds, I don't know, whatever it is that you can get a breath of air, barely making it, aware that everything's shattered and gone. But this is when you start to have those moments where wave, and you're like, I can't keep doing this.
Yeah.
I have to go inside and listen to myself, because if I keep running myself into the places that I feel no joy, that I feel lack of authenticity, right? Like, I don't belong here. This isn't who I am anymore.
Yeah, I mean, even your clothes, your shoes, everything.
Everything.
There's a comfort to the old things. Like, it doesn't feel...
You're not ready to throw them away.
Exactly. But it doesn't bring you any sort of...
Actually, the linking objects are very sacred. Mm-hmm. You're almost leaving them alone for a while. But the inside is where you have to go in order to put one foot in front of the other. I'm not sure when you're going inside, it's a forced thing, and I don't know that you're actually in the beginning consciously choosing it. It's chosen for you if you're dealing with death. Divorce, I'd love some comments from my divorced people. If you feel the same patterns, you might have to choose to go inside even more because there's probably even more external noise and like friction and back and forth, and the person's still there, and like that's got to make it a little more difficult. But going inside means if I don't listen to my inner self, if I don't ask what I need, who I am, and where am I going, I will not be able to take forward steps. I won't be able to go back to work. And this is when we're getting into like a little bit further out from the actual, even if it's like a month, like most of us cannot afford to take a year off. Even if we can, most of us would feel as though we're drowning and dying if you gave us that much time to be with ourselves. Because remember, step one, we're feeling the abandonment whether we want to or not. That's forcing us into a mindfulness state. It's forcing us into the now. And then the going in the inside is the only possible way for you to take care of yourself and not get hit by those waves every 30 seconds where you feel like you're swallowing water and going under and drowning.
Yeah,
right?
I think it's that sense of drowning that, like I said,
beautiful metaphor for a grief.
I looked in the mirror a lot.
Yeah, you talk about that a lot.
That was kind of the beginning of the realization that me was no more. And then I had to look and really start to think. Now, I will say the first lots of times I looked in the mirror, I did not know the answer. I didn't know who I was, which is a big question mark, which is very unsettling when you're 46.
But I think everyone feels that way. Who am I now that I am not this person's person? This, in this station, at these dinners I come in with this, it's like everything associated with your life is gone. And so there's a natural, who am I, that's going to happen for you. So going inside, I'm going to say this. If you're a person that I think is like David, who may or may not have, his coping strategy in the past was to dissociate. And I think a lot of men do this. A lot of women do this too. But a lot of people go outside of themselves so they don't feel, right? And it's a very effective coping strategy. I've done that myself many, 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 many years too. So when you go outside of yourself, you're not having to feel inside of yourself. But that strategy, for whatever reason, in death, you can try it and it might work for a second, but it actually is like kind of how drinking will take away anxiety. If you've ever, I'm the opposite. I reached for a lot of wine after Carl died as a coping strategy, and it would numb me in a good way where my anxiety would come down because becoming a sole provider overnight, pandemic hit, like so many things were happening. I was so anxious to be alone that I was going to ruin my family. And I would drink to calm my anxiety down. And then the next morning it was like, back with a vengeance in triple time. Yeah. So it's very similar to that. Like if you don't go inside and you don't listen, that grief is coming back with a vengeance. And you can't get better. I
actually would say that I did look inside and didn't hear anything.
It doesn't mean you know.
Yeah, nothing came to me until really I got professional help. That's really the turning point from the helplessness and the emptiness, loneliness.
Because when you went inside, you realized this was way more than you know how to untangle.
Right.
And you weren't comfortable maybe feeling all this? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I didn't even know where to start.
Yeah.
And I did have a sense that I thought there was something wrong with me, maybe.
Mm-hmm. And you've told me in the past, and the listeners in the past, you had a strong sense to commit suicide if you kept going the same way. If you kept with those old strategies.
That's the despair of nothingness. I because I didn't know who I was, why I was there, what I was doing, there is, that's the choice. That's a little bit.
Am I dead already?
Exactly. It's a little bitty step to killing yourself. And I thought, and then justified it thinking, well, I'm not helping the kids anyway, so there's nothing.
Okay, so to the listeners out there, you can hear this is an acute death. It happened very quickly and very traumatically. The processing time to absorb the abandonment comes after shock. And then if If you're the male person who's maybe never felt before, I mean, that's a double down on like, oh my God, because even the women who like, I'm a super feeler, I'm always feeling everything, it's so annoying. I even felt this way, like overwhelming amounts of feelings, and you just want it to go away, kind of, and you can't, it won't go away.
Yeah, I would just describe it simply as pain.
So much pain.
Very painful.
But you have to go inside to feel, and when you go inside, and you're scared, you might go out and in and out and in. That's okay. You need to try to do what somatic practitioners call introspection. This is a polyvagal term, but it's like paying attention, even if there's no answers right away. The practice of listening to what you might need or asking the questions starts this energetic relationship internally with the self that is it is a repercussion of the loneliness that we're talking about and the abandonment, is that you're doing yourself this little self-care where you're listening for the first time maybe ever for most of us. And eventually that little voice inside of you may need to go to therapy. I highly recommend therapy. Everyone should go to therapy in general. It's a huge, huge helper, especially if you're overwhelmed, feeling suicidal ideations, which is extremely normal in this walk. It would be easier to die than to feel all this pain, and I am normalizing that. And if you are feeling suicidal and listening to this, seek help. And we'll put some links in the resources, but get a therapist, get any kind of therapy. There's so many free therapy hotlines out there for suicide prevention. You're normal to feel this way, is what I'm saying. And going inside is scary as hell, but it will actually propel you to healing. Okay, so step 3. I like to call this step trusting yourself, and there's lots of words for that. It's a building of a relationship with the self after you're going inside. And these 2 steps is where I start to think, like, if you don't go inside, you can't build trust. And if you don't build trust, you can't get to the next step, right? And you might go inside, feel all this stuff, and then really realize, oh shit, I'm totally back to step 1. Another loss, as we talked about last time, secondary loss happens, and then you walk through abandonment again, and then you have to go inside and feel the feelings, and then, but trusting yourself. So can you talk a little bit about, you got the therapist at that time, and that changed everything for you? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I definitely had zero trust in myself until I got therapy. But very quickly in therapy, like maybe 3 sessions, immediately developed a trust in myself and immediately had the idea that I could do it.
And you saw a grief expert?
Yeah, Jan was wonderful. There was, in the first couple of sessions, was really mainly 2 things. It's a dump, right? The grief dump where you tell the whole fucking story. And for me, it was the first time I really told the story. I had never like walked through from the moment that I woke up that day until the present day. I had not done that. I had never told, I would tell people, yeah, she had a break, kind of like I did today. I gave a paraphrased version of it. But with Jan, I went through every single second of it and every look on her face and every smell in the car, every little detail that's very traumatic to go through. So that was the first part of it. And then the second thing, which really started to build my trust, was normalization. She just, everything, and I thought what I was telling her was off the fucking wall, right? I thought, in fact, I thought the first time I talked to her that I just told her something she'd never heard before. That was just so fucking crazy.
The stories in our head always make us think that everything we feel is so far off. Yeah,
and then when she normalized it, actually my first response to normalization was bullshit. I thought, no, this is unique.
Well, it's too big to feel
right. And then
universal.
It started to sink in, and she would tell me little stories about whatever, other grief things that she had witnessed or helped with, and it was extremely helpful. And it really, I started to look in the mirror and was more able to even ask the question of who I was and who I could be and what I wanted to be, what I needed to be. Because it dawned on me that the grief, as terrible as it was, that it was going to change me forever, and that I had an opportunity to do something I'd never done before, which was really look inside myself and really figure out who I am and what I am and what I want. And I had never really done that before in my whole life, and that was a huge moment for me. And that was therapy. Now, some people may be able to get it without therapy. I don't know, but I tried without therapy for a time, and it was I was getting nowhere. In fact, I was maybe getting even more detached and more unavailable to even the little bit of resources that I had. Was feeling very detached from my parents at that time. Like, just did not want to see them, didn't want to talk to them. I was really withdrawing a lot, and my inability to interact and cope was getting fairly dramatic. My house, my nanny would love to tell you the story, but my house was devolving into some sort of weird
Lord of the Flies.
Lord of the Flies meets fraternity house meets one of those basements you never want to go into. You know, it was disturbing, retrospectively. And
So you began to trust yourself, and I'm not sure through therapy. I'm not sure that everyone, and I can say this, I don't know that I recognized that I was trusting myself. I would have never you don't feel that sense of trust to yourself. What, again, remember,
this is retrospective.
These are survival skills, sort of, but it is trusting yourself. So you're trusting that your inner voice, when you listen to it, it will keep you from going back into a drowning state. So now that I look back on this, I understand that it's crucial that as a coach, and what we do here at Wake is that we help people understand that they have to trust themselves, because they're the only person in this scenario that can pull themselves out, even if your whole family lost a person. Reminders to the parents out there, or even to a family who lost a person. Every family member in that family had a loss, but the loss is different. For each child, which is, in the beginning, as a parent, you think we all lost this person. Right. But it's very different to lose a parent than it is to lose a spouse. And it's very different to lose a daughter or a son than it is to lose a spouse, right? So it's very important. Therapists often will help you with that, to say, like, hey, reminder, your grief is different than this person's grief. So be alone, go inside. You've been left alone. You're in an abandonment state, not by anyone's fault, or most likely not by anyone's fault. And then you have to trust yourself that when you listen to that inner voice and you get the help that you need, and you ask for what you need, you say what you need, which is, in theory, what you just did by going to therapy. You knew you needed help. That you listen to that voice, and then you feel a sense of maybe not joy, maybe not belonging, but for me, it was like when I trusted my inner voice and I stopped doing crap that I couldn't do energetically. People pleasing was a big part of my coping strategies. I felt a sense of relief, and I had more energy. And when I had more energy, I could have more resilience. And when I had more resilience, I could feel and handle more, and I could show up better. And so it became this cyclical pattern of going inside, listening to the self, doing what the self said, and then being shocked that, when I take care of myself, I didn't even have words for this then, but when I listen and take care of myself, I feel better. I feel peace, more peace. I feel feelings that are heading towards safety was really what I now know it was. I was in a deep anxiety state personally, and I was reaching for anything that made me feel safe. And maybe you were too.
For sure.
Okay, so learn to trust yourself out there. I want you to seek out anything, any person, any energy, anything you need to feel safe. And that's in your body, right? Inner energy field. Thank you so much for joining us today. I just am so thrilled to be able to offer you guys these steps. And no matter how difficult sometimes they are to walk through, right? None of the healing journey is ever without pain, without difficulty, without working spots. And so we're just so grateful that you took the opportunity to listen to these steps, and a reminder that if you're feeling a lot of feelings or this triggered a lot of things, a lot of resources in the show notes, not everything is going to be figured out, right, all at once. So work the steps, and if you're missing something in the step, you might notice you go back to the step. So thank you so much for joining us in the second part of Wake the F Up. And healing from loss is a lifetime journey. So we appreciate you showing up, and we appreciate you for giving us your heart today.
This has been Wake the F Up podcast, hosted by Alix and David Long. Be sure to check out other episodes where our community of experts share tools and ideas to help you wake to the life inside of you. If you enjoyed this episode of Wake the F Up, please like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Join the Wake community by downloading our app. Just search for The Wake Wellness in the Apple or Android App Store, and follow us on Instagram at The Wake Wellness. Thanks for listening.